Hey Skiba News Nation family, thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. You can also help support this channel by getting yourself some Skiba News Nation merch. Also, we are proud to announce that we are now on Patreon, where you will get bonus content, shoutouts, and much more. Thank you again for watching and helping us stay on the quest for truth. Huge shout out to all our Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for your support. We couldn't do this show without you. If you want to help support us, go to patreon.com/Skiba News Nation. We are also proud to announce that Skiba News Nation podcast is now available on podcast platforms.
What it costs. I want to know what the truth is. And I hope that people, my son, anybody, if my name comes up, whether you like me, whether you agree with me or not, at least you can respect the fact that he's on a quest for truth. He's on a quest for truth.
Welcome to Skiba News Nation, bringing you unfiltered views, news, interviews, discussions, and more. And now, here's your host, Jeremiah Skiba, award-winning musician and son of Rob Skiba.
Hey Skiba News Nation family, welcome to this episode of Skiba News Nation. It's episode 25. I'm your host, Jeremiah Skiba, and today we're going to be talking about 9/11. A little weird is all.
Building 7 is a little weird. It was.
Ye, formerly known as Kanye West, blocked from his big money. Mediaopoly, big media supporting dark sexual agendas. China, protests and lockdowns. An all-new Opas corner. And for history, we're going to be talking about Frank Olson, the man murdered by MKULTRA, memes, and much more, so stay tuned. Now, without further ado, we have another great show for you today because we have Jake Grant in studio with us. Welcome, Jake.
Hey, Jeremiah. We had to stop by on our way back through Dallas and hang out with you guys a little bit further, so had to get one more of these live shows in, so I'm really excited to be here.
It was really popular, the last one.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, had a blast. And hey, man, what about that new intro?
Yeah, well, I want to give a special shout out to a guy named Jerry Ward, who sent me those several different of those really cool animations. His company is W Design Studios LLC, and if you're looking for that kind of stuff, he's the guy to go to. So maybe I'll leave a description down below to his website, or in the description, I'll leave his link to his website if you're interested.
Very cool.
Anyways, so there's one more thing I wanted to, before we get started, I just wanted to tell everybody that those who want to help our ministry keep going and growing, all my dad's books and DVD bundles are still available at babylonrisingbooks.com/store.html. And
yeah, and also don't forget that if you want to help support, Sheila and the Kingsgate Media and Skiba News Nation, another way is you can grab the Torah portion workbooks that are used for the virtual house church, and these are a great way to kind of write all your notes down while you study through the scriptures. And I've been helping out with virtual house church for 5 years now, and this is a great way to just kind of every year start to write down little revelations and interesting things you get as you study through the scriptures. And you can see they're really well made. They have a workbook for every single book of the Torah, and as you go through the scriptures, you can see on screen now on the Virtual House Church website, go to the store page and you can order these books here. So
awesome. All right, well, let's jump right into Skiba News Nation episode 25. You ready?
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a good one.
All right, let's do it.
So I want to start off our news segment with a couple videos, get our conspiratorial minds and hats put on. So we have a little clip here talking about how 9/11 has some very interesting and weird things about the narrative, and that's just to get our brains going today. So let's hit it, Opa.
What I say about 9/11 is like some things are weird. Building 7 is a little weird.
It was,
weird.
yeah.
The way it fell was a little weird. The towers were built to take an impact from a plane, and that they fell from fire, and that they both fell like that, all neat and cuddly.
Yes.
And they go, well, it shook the fireproofing off. It's a little weird.
Yes. Turns out the Pentagon had lost $1 trillion like the day before, and
It's a
then
little weird.
one of the planes happened to blow up where all the files were.
Yeah, it's a little weird. And it's a little weird that a guy that can barely fly a plane was able to f***ing glide 2 inches off the ground into the
Couldn't
side of
identify
the
a body, but they had the passports?
the plane incinerated into a ball of fire, but a paper passport.
That is a little weird.
It's a little weird. It's a
I'm-
little weird.
I must say so myself.
Oh man. So, back in 2001, I've heard it said that a lot of people would never want to relive that day of 9/11, right? But the day after and the weeks following, they would love to go back to, because the nation was so unified and patriotic. But something to keep in mind is it almost seemed to be such an obvious deception in terms of all the inconsistencies of that particular story and narrative and event, that it set the nation up for all of the deceptions that we see divvied out on mankind ever since then. It really started to be the focal point of media deception and all these counter narratives to push the New World Order agenda.
You think that's why Jan 6, they're so that they say that it's worse than 9/11. I've heard Nancy Pelosi say those words, that it was worse than 9/11, and I mean, there's no way.
No way at all. But you can definitely tell that they were prepared. What was it? They had a media team in Nancy's office just waiting for the.
It was her daughter,
show
I
up.
think, too.
They
that was
let the
filming it.
people into the Capitol building, and they were like waving them in, like, "Hey!"
And that
you
Fed
guys,
guy, and
come
everybody's
on.
going Fed, 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 and
Oh man,
he's not in jail.
yeah. I mean,
Crazy.
this is just another example of how these big events happen, and then they are used to push agendas forward. And of course, there were people that are there that their lives are straight up ruined now, just because they got swept away with the vibe of the night, and they followed people.
I mean, look
into
at
the
Pete Davidson.
Oh yeah.
That was a joke.
What do you?
But his dad did die, I think.
Oh yeah, at 9/11.
Yeah.
I mean, he.
And then he became Pete Davidson, so I guess he's still living with that.
Yeah. Anyways, the whole point being is that we want to set our minds in the right framework of, hey, this has been something that is ongoing and has been going on for 20 plus years of counter narratives, of secret programs, of just lies being disseminated to the American people to get us all hoopla hoorah and push towards the New World Order agendas, the Agenda 2030, the Great Reset. All of these are more recent agendas that we have, of course, have media coverage pushing this and that, and it's just it's crazy. And
That's where it all started. 9/11, Building 7. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, kind of weird. It all started with us blinding ourselves and not admitting, hey, we're being lied to.
Well, it should be like the courts, innocent until proven guilty. Like I don't know what to believe until you show me all the real facts.
Yeah,
Which Building 7, nobody's ever talked about.
it's kind of
What
weird.
is the official story? Kind of weird.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with nowadays, which is setting up some of our discussion for today, is whenever you buy a lie, you become that much more susceptible to buy the next couple lies because you've already just ignored all the red flags for the first deception, and now as you enter into subsequent distractions and deceptions, you're probably going to fall for them. And so whenever we talk about the media, whenever we talk about what's coming on the world and things we've covered in our show in the past couple weeks, guys, you can't double down. You have to expose the truth. You have to admit that, hey, these guys are liars, and I'm not going to trust a liar again. And whether that's with the medical industry, whether that's with the space programs, whether that's with the military corporate industrial complex that is pushing for war and, you know, to choose one side or the other. And
they want to scare us. They want us. They want to control us with fear.
Yes.
That's what I think.
Well, let's go ahead and play our next clip here.
A multi-billionaire to not being able to use my Apple Pay. 4 nights ago, I couldn't use my Apple Pay because somehow Adidas was able to legally go in and freeze my money. And when I see this, I think, well, if this could happen to me, this could happen to other Americans. And for what?
Wow. So I don't know if you guys remember some of our coverage of his controversial anti-Semitic statements, right? Which he actually then goes on to prove to paparazzi, hey, most of the CEOs and high echelon kind of VIPs of most of this industry, of the media and of the movies and all that, they are run by Jewish people. Yeah. And he shows like a list and he's like, look, it's color coded, and it totally shut the paparazzi guy up.
You know what's funny about that is it's almost like a Norm Macdonald setup. Norm Macdonald had the same kind of jokes about Marlon Brando a long time ago. Opa might remember this. It was like back, I guess, in the 90s, and he was saying jokes that were very much like that, and it just shows that how far we've come along today, how everything is offensive, and they want to cancel you. They want to cancel everything you say, and nothing can even be talked about, right?
It's offensive to call out a factual statement, right?
Yep.
And I just, we have to set this up and explain kind of the backstory to why Kanye's money has been taken away from him as a multi-millionaire, billionaire type figure. He now can't even use the money that he's earned, right?
That's scary.
And it's because of, you know, he's being censored, he's being canceled, but that should alarm you whether you agree with his anti-Semitic statements or not, because that's what can happen to all Americans. Can we play that video one more time, Opa?
A multi-billionaire to not being able to use my Apple Pay. 4 nights ago, I couldn't use my Apple Pay because somehow Adidas was able to legally go in and freeze my money. And when I see this, I think, well, if this could happen to me, this could happen to other Americans. And for what?
That video, it really does warn all other Americans that, hey, you can be canceled too, but not just with your freedom of speech, but financially as well.
Yep.
And it calls to mind the whole social credit score system in China and how it's literally being applied to some of the most successful people like Ye, right? So check out this picture. They call you anti-Semitic, but they never call you a liar. Did you ever notice that? And it's talking about, you know, his statements.
That is pretty funny. That's interesting.
To learn who rules over you, simply find out who you are not allowed to criticize. And this is a great kind of analogy. And while I know this is all tied to the supposed anti-Semitic statements of Kanye saying that Jewish people are running all these big corporations and media conglomerates, well, this applies not only to that topic, but to the medical industry and some of the things that have happened over the past few years.
Yep.
If you're not allowed to criticize, if you're not allowed to comment and share,
you're a conspiracy crazy person.
Exactly. And
you're always welcome on this show. If you ever see this, we will never cancel you. You're always welcome. So I'll just throw that out there.
Let's show this next picture. It's right along these same lines. So you obviously have the depiction of a prostitute here with all the big media companies tattooed all over her, right? I want you to say men can get pregnant and white skin is the cause of the world's problem. Anything you want me to say, Big Daddy? And, you know, forgive the crude depiction of what these companies actually are, which are prostitutes to big money, pretty much.
Yep.
And you can see that this is how these agendas are pushed forward. is the people that are at the top of the companies control the interests of the companies. And it
Like with the changing of the logo during Pride Month.
yeah,
Very much their arm is being twisted, because if they don't do what the narrative tells them to do, then they're in big trouble.
that's a great correlation. It's exactly right. I mean, it's just like Pride Month. And you can see all of the companies that are beholden to a higher power, and that higher power is an ideology that is against traditional morality, biblical morality. It's against the family unit. It's against masculinity. It's against the population growth. It wants everybody to be effeminized and trans and all kinds of stuff. And we just can't sit idly by while these agendas are pushed forward. So that leads us into our next clip here. Check this out.
A Mediaopoly. The whole media is controlled by a few corporations thanks to deregulation by the FCC.
You mean Disney, Fox, Westinghouse, and good old GE?
They own networks from CBS to CNBC.
They can use them to say whatever they please and put down the opinions of anyone who disagrees.
Or stuff about PCBs.
What are PCBs?
They come from electric power plants built by Westinghouse and GE.
They can give you lots of cancer that can hurt your body.
But on network TV, you rarely hear anything bad about the nuclear industry.
Like when Westinghouse was sued for fraud.
Which time?
When GE made defective bolts, it was an unreported crime. Or when it was boycotted for operating nuclear bomb plants just to squeeze a dime.
That's a footnote, by the way.
A footnote protects you from folks who doubt what you say. Now maybe the voices in my head will go away.
But the big shots don't care. They're all sitting pretty thanks to corporate welfare.
What's that now?
They get billions in subsidies from the government. It's supposed to create jobs, but that's not how it's spent. They use tax and soft money to support congressmen who will vote for weapons programs again and again and let them dump toxic waste where the young ones play.
INGE made the bullets that shot JFK.
You contribute to this chain every time you buy a product sponsored on this show.
That's what NBC doesn't want you to know. So the next time, please stand by, please stand by. It means there's technical difficulty, supposedly. So if you see a please stand by, you know it's all part of these big lies.
Why they take Norm McDonald away?
Cause they made too many jokes about OJ.
Was Lorne Michaels overruled?
Now don't be.
That was kind of a Norm joke too, which is
Wow.
kind of funny.
So that cartoon was created for SNL, I believe.
Oh, it was?
And it was banned almost right away. And it explains Mediaopoly.
Well, it's funny because half of those companies are now Disney.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I was thinking about when I was watching it. It was like, Disney owns that, Disney owns that. Like, what don't they own now?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the concentration of all of the things we consume into just these few corporations. And this is something that I know is why, for example, Ye is being canceled. It's why censorship is running rampant on places like Facebook, Instagram. And this brings to mind Twitter, which we're seeing a little bit of a change up because of Elon Musk acquiring Twitter. And it's actually been quite entertaining for me to see some of the exchanges between Elon Musk and some of the more liberal people that disagree with his, adding Donald Trump back and allowing more conservative figures to speak. And it's not that I don't have suspicions on my own about some of the underlying influences and motivations of Elon Musk. However, check this picture out. CNN, Elon Musk could threaten free speech on Twitter by literally allowing people to speak freely.
Don Lemon at his best.
So, I mean, there is only one way to be able to fight the big multinational corporate war against the freedom of speech, and that is to speak the truth. And
Yep. That's what they don't like.
That's what they don't like. And Unfortunately, a lot of people have been forced to alternative platforms, so that pretty much the system has been purged of anybody speaking up on a variety of topics that are bannable, and that are controversial. Or
It kind of reminds me of what they're doing on YouTube. Like a lot of you guys saw last week's episode had a thing where you had to confirm it. It was 18 plus, which we didn't say or do anything that was out of the ordinary.
Nope.
But I kept fighting it, and then finally they took that down. They let us, keep the video up there. But if you don't fight, they'll beat you.
Yep. Yeah. And that's what they're used to, is having all this power and people just giving into it.
Yep.
And that's kind of what we saw with, last year's medical experiment, is people were kind of forced into caving or losing their normal lifestyle, losing their job, losing whatever. And then people that speak up against the topic lose their channel, lose their this, lose their that.
And their livelihood.
And,
oh
man. And so let's check out this next picture here. Isn't it ironic, right? That most movie audiences watch movies like The Matrix, The Patriot, Braveheart, V for Vendetta, and The Hunger Games, and they cheer for the disobedient, rebellious underdogs who challenge and resist, even violently, against the masters and the controllers. Then they go home and proudly pay tribute to the state, obey whatever arbitrary commands the political masters make up, and condemn anyone who doesn't.
Well, what's crazy about that is I was about to show how Joker, 2019's Joker,
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen it?
Yes, I have.
That's probably one of my favorite movies, but there's a lot of parallels of them predicting what happened in 2022, but that movie fits right in that category.
That'd be a great breakdown.
Yeah. Well, I was almost done with it, but I wanted to save it for next week just so I should have done it this week, but
That's all right. Well, something to look forward to next week, guys.
yeah, Joker, 2019. It's the best Joker, I think, in my personal opinion. My favorite movie of all time.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so interesting because the media that we're fed, it kind of makes us apathetic, because we're like, oh, I don't really have to behave in a brave, heroic, and I don't have to stand up for anything meaningful because I'm being entertained by a TV show that's showing me somebody who's acting and doing it in a film or a movie, and it gives me the good feeling as if I'm doing it.
But when I live my real life, I'm hiding behind a screen.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the trap we find ourselves in, man. That is. So let's check out this next clip here.
Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. With the Balenciaga scandal still fresh in everyone's minds, the Post-Millennials reporting that the CEO of a trans activist group known as Mermaids has resigned after a board member was ousted over advocating for pedophilia. This comes as the Washington Post and the New York Times and other outlets are giving glowing reviews to a new play which is sympathetic to, yes, you guessed it, yet again, pedophiles. Join us now to discuss all of this and more is the author of that second headline for Human Events, Libby Emmons, the editor-in-chief for the Post-Millennial. Thanks for being here tonight, Libby.
Thanks so much, Kara.
Great. So what play is this? What's it about? And why are the major outlets so impressed with it?
So this is a play called Downstate. It was written by Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright Bruce Norris. And it was commissioned by Steppenwolf, which is a very famous and storied theater in Chicago. And the play premiered out here at Playwrights Horizons, New York. It was funded by granting organizations that seemed to think this was a good idea, and it was, it was commissioned. So, I mean, this was deemed to be a good idea right from the very start. It's about some men who had been convicted of pedophilia and are living in a group home together. I haven't seen the play.
Oh, that's
I'm
so
not
sweet.
super interested in seeing a play that normalizes and sympathizes with men who had been convicted of sexually molesting children. But that's what this play does. And it's very interesting because the reviews that I read of this play said that the least likable character in the play was one of the men's victims who comes back to confront his abuser.
And that is very interesting. As you were saying, that has a lot of institutional support. I think you mentioned in the Human Events article, it's not just a fringe play that, that we found in the corner of nowhere that we're trying to make into a big deal. This is something that is quite mainstreamed. And do you think that the normalization of pedophilia might have been the point of it?
Yeah, I don't know if that was the author's intention. Certainly, I spent a great deal of time working in theater, and a lot of times what happens is you have some people, they have some money, they say something like, hey, would you be interested in writing a play about this? And you say, hey, that could be interesting. Sure, I'll take your money. I'll definitely go for it. Or you get like a little thread of something and you think these are interesting characters and you feel like, sure, I want to explore this. But as you said, yes, there's a fair amount of institutional support. Is the project to normalize pedophilia? I don't know if that's necessarily what they think that they are doing. Probably what they think that they are doing is destigmatizing pedophiles, which we have seen bubbling up in academia for a few years now. We've seen authors writing books about how important it is to separate the individual who commits this horrible action from the action itself. And certainly I can sympathize with the idea of, hating the sin and loving the sinner for sure. But what we're talking about here is a cultural effort to remake the concept of pedophilia from something that is a sinful thing that should be condemned to something where we have sympathy for the people who are afflicted with this, or we start to perceive pedophilia as a sexual orientation all of its own. There has been joking over the years that the P should be added to the LGBT alphabet soup to be inclusive of pedophilia. And so what we're looking at is sort of the next phase in the child exploitation movement of sexualizing kids from a very young age, breaking down their barriers and ushering them into adult sexual lifestyles for the, perverted kinks of grown-ups.
And it's just so sad. It just seems like there's never an end to these stories. They're everywhere. And so I want to also then go to the other headline from your website, the Post Millennial. We have about 2 minutes left on the clock. I was wondering if you could explain for our audience, there appears to be two scandals kind of dovetailing here with the CEO of a big trans movement in the UK, a trans advocacy organization, I should say, called Mermaids, with the CEO now stepping down. You have a board member who was caught advocating basically for pedophilia or destigmatizing, however you want to describe it. But then also it seems she transitioned her own young son at a very early age, which is causing its own scandal. So I was wondering if you could explain that for our audience tonight.
Yeah, so Susie Green was the head of this organization, Mermaids, which has its tentacles throughout the UK in education and advocacy, particularly for the T in the LGBT, heading there. So she transitioned her young son when he was only 16 years old. There are reports that she and her husband particularly did not want to have a gay son. And so they went ahead with this idea that he was trans. The child underwent surgery in Thailand, I believe at the age of 16, at which point he did not actually have enough tissue to construct the appearance of female genitals, which is something that Susie Green later joked about. Mermaids recently took another gay rights group to court, saying that this gay rights group was transphobic and didn't have a right to be a charity. And that's headed by Alison Bailey, who's a barrister in the UK and has her own sort of fascinating story. So Mermaids went to court. As part of the discovery, it turned out that one of their board members had been advocating for the destigmatization of pedophiles, which is, of course, pro-pedo light is kind of how you could think about that. So as part of their effort to discredit another charity, they in fact were discredited themselves. And now she has stepped down.
Funny how that seems to work out. Livy, thanks for joining us tonight.
All right. So just an example of some of the agendas that are given glowing reviews by our mainstream media, that these things are propped up as good and beautiful and wonderful, that you're humanizing people that prey on children, and yet it's just such a topsy-turvy world we live in, and an alarming story that this is something that is allowed to happen in our cities and in our communities, and this is just one example of the type of agenda pushing story, and you know, it's just, it's crazy, and it's definitely something that we need to take our children out of environments where they're being indoctrinated to think, you know, along the lines of this just kind of dangerous ideology that completely goes against nature, that goes against, you know, if you're from a biblical standpoint, goes against the scriptures in many ways, you know. And what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think that's the most disgusting thing, them trying to normalize pedophilia. I don't even know if that word is appropriate on YouTube, but do you remember the episode, and I know you guys that have been watching for a long time, you probably remember this, but me trying to find the American flag on the YouTube search thing, and the one thing that came up, one of the things was, it was called the MAPS, M-A-P-S flag, and it was a pedophilia flag, and it's part of the LGBT whatever, and I said that's the next thing they're going to normalize. I don't know if I said that out loud, but I told several people that's going to be the next thing they normalize, which is so sick. I mean, kids are supposed to be, you know,
protected,
and they're, I don't know, I just think the whole thing is sick. Them trying to make a funny show about it. Like, I don't understand. There's nothing funny about it.
It comes with the rainbow of sexuality, because once you say, oh, there's a variety, it's not just male and female, which is how I believe we are created and what makes sense biologically. Even if you believe in evolution, how does the traits of, you know, homosexuality get passed down to subsequent generations? It can't. So it even goes. So if you're coming from an atheistic kind of evolutionary mindset, it doesn't even make sense in your own worldview that this is something that should be so prevalent. So how is it in the past few years that this has exploded in numbers? It's because of media influence. It's because that this is one of the number one agendas that is being used in a way to control the world's population, but also to degrade our morality as a society so that we're more susceptible to being controlled. Because when we're spending all of our time and focus kind of coddling our own sexual sins or whatever, and it's not to paint one thing as worse than the other, but what it is to say, hey, there's a reason that this particular sin, right, is being elevated because it completely takes over your identity. And that's, you know, all you're doing in terms of changing the world is you're going out there and making more of you, right? And and that's why it's something that we see is so prevalent. And it's not to say, hey, you know, people can't change. It's not to, you know, make people who are of that persuasion feel like there's no hope, because they're just the worst ever. But the truth is that this is the agenda that is being pushed the most heavily in our kids media and Disney movies and television. And it's all because of kind of the rainbow of sexual persuasion it being normalized. And now that is leading to the far extreme, which is horrifying, which would have been horrifying at any point, but is now kind of coming to the forefront of the light of day.
I think they've been grooming us up to this point,
getting
to
us
be able to
normalized, with all these strange sexualities and
where people are like, oh, okay, and then
finally the final P on the end of the sentence comes, and you go, oh no,
Chomo. Okay.
Oh, all right, so let's go to our next story here, which is
just say no.
We have a picture here. I thought this was interesting. Maybe just a little break in our current news for a historical look. Did you know that mermaids are actually recorded scripturally as beings that existed?
No, but I've seen a Fiji mermaid, and I thought those were fake. But it would not surprise me if, like, I've seen some pretty convincing video of people like actually still seeing them.
if you could bring that back up just briefly, I wanted to read it. And this is an example of one of the first alternative sexualities that popped up on the world according to the extra biblical narrative. And it talks about here in chapter 19 regarding the punishment of the women that chose the first alternative sexuality, which was fallen angels, right? Mm-hmm. And it says, and Uriel said to me, here shall stand the angel who have connected themselves with women. So the first kind of LGBTQ in the ancient times was right? Angelic attraction, right? And their spirits, assuming many different forms, are defiling mankind and shall lead them astray, into sacrificing to demons as gods, till the day of the great judgment in which they shall be judged, till they are made an end of. And the woman also of the angels who went astray shall become sirens, which are the most ancient form of pretty much the modern mermaid, right? Mm-hmm. And what do we know about sirens? Sirens in ancient lore used their song to brainwash the minds of men. And that's why I wanted to share that picture and how it's relevant to what we're talking about is the first alternative sexuality is well known for using their medium, mm-hmm. to brainwash men to fall to their demise.
Yeah, I mean, I remember learning about, when I first learned about mermaids as a little kid, but it was about sailors, and they would sing, and they would get sailors to go overboard, and then they pull them in.
Exactly.
And they make them look so nice in the cartoons, but they weren't nice.
And I have a feeling that the people pushing the LGBTQ agenda are manifesting in a way kind of this primordial spirit of these sirens, mm-hmm. using media to allure the minds of mankind to go to our demise. And anyways, just I wanted to make that connection there because, of course, with, Rob's research mm-hmm. and my fascination with extra biblical books and ancient lore, it does tie into our current news because that is how media is being used.
It's like the OOG.
The OOG of...
OOG.
All right, let's go on to our next story here.
I want to start in China. The protests in China, they say this is all about the COVID-19 measures. It is and it isn't. It's about slavery. That's what this is really all about. This started, bubbling here recently. Then there was a fire, and I don't know if you've seen, but they are bolting people into their houses. You can open the doors. This fire was raging through an apartment complex. Nobody could get out because the state had locked the doors from the outside. That didn't go over real well. Then the people at Foxconn heard that there was coming another zero COVID lockdown was coming. Now, these people have been in lockdown for about 2 years. 2 years. So, Foxconn is the wonderful place where they make all of the Apple products. Oh, Apple should be so proud. They have everything you need in that building. So you sleep on one floor, you eat on another floor, you maybe watch a movie on floor 4, and of course you do all your work on floor 1. It's tremendous. You never, ever have to leave the building. Well, people heard that there was another lockdown coming, and they started jumping the fence. Now, because they have social credit systems where you have to have your iPhone or your cell phone, and it tracks you, and it gives you either a red or a green. Red means you got COVID, but not really. Not really. That's what the state says, but they are changing things to be able to control people. Again, the zero COVID is not about COVID. It's about control. So they started jumping the fence, but they couldn't get onto a train or a bus. They weren't running, and if they could get on, their little red badge said you couldn't actually board. So they just started walking, and they started walking on the highway. The state got very upset and said, hey, Foxconn, you got to clean this up. And so the Foxconn, which is basically the state, said, we're going to offer 4 times the bonus. If everybody will just come and work, just apply, you get 4 times the bonus. Oh, do the people who stayed at Foxconn, do they get the bonus too? No, discontent. Then all these new people were hired. What happened? Oh, there was a misunderstanding. I'm sorry. Is Mandarin your first language? Oh, it is? Well, there was a translation problem. You're not getting 4 times the bonus. That's when everybody went crazy. They all jumped the fence and they left. Now, this is not Tiananmen Square, and this is really important that you understand. Tiananmen Square ended in 1989. This is much larger than that. The number of regions in China and the number of people that are participating. In 1989, there was no internet. There was no mobile phone. So compared to then, today, hundreds of millions of Chinese are aware of what's going on. Most Chinese in 1989 learned about Tiananmen in the next school year, if they ever heard about it at all. But at the time of the protests, only 2% of the Chinese population even knew anything about them. It's key to remember, Tiananmen wasn't a protest that happened over a single day or weekend. The protest took nearly 2 months before they rolled the tanks out. So we may be in just the first inning here, but this is getting out of control in China. So, protester or a worker protest at Foxconn, the Apple factory. By the way, Apple, they really care about the people. Man, they're so enlightened. They're so great. As an artist, I can only use an Apple product because they just get me as an artist, you know? And that's why I was so proud to see that they shut off the airdrop ability in China. Now, why would you do that? Well, because that's a way you can communicate with other people without having it tracked. And Apple is so one with humanity and the earth and what's good and right. They wanted to make sure that the government could track every word, every image, everything. They needed, Xi Jinping, he gets a bad name. And they just want to help him out a bit. So congratulations, Apple. So for several weeks, this has been going on. It went from tens of thousands of Foxconn workers to hundreds of thousands of other people in the area. But the protest was still primarily about removing the zero COVID restrictions. But then, over just a couple more days, something changed. I'll pick it up there in 60 seconds. Okay, so the worker protests were, start as an anti-COVID protest. However, this has now evolved into an anti-CCP protest, and that's not done. Up until 2 weeks ago, protesters publicly called for the end of Xi Jinping's rule and the end of the Communist Party, and it would have been pretty much done, disappeared by the secret police, likely put to death. But over the last few days, over the weekend, thousands of protesters have taken to the streets to scream those exact demands, spray painting the same on the sides of government buildings, even posting "Down with the CCP" online. This has not been seen since Tiananmen. The other major difference, which should matter to every American and the whole world, is the size and the scope of China's role in the global economy. In 1989, China was less than 2% of global GDP and engaged in very little trade. Today, China is nearly 20% of the global GDP and provides more than 30% of all manufacturing. China facilitates over 25% of all global shipping. China consumes 20% of all global energy supplies. They used to say, if we catch a cold, Europe gets pneumonia. Now it's if China sneezes, the world could die. What happens if China has a heart attack? We have supply chain problems now. Wait until this country has to shut down. Also, it's key to remember the CCP just had their once every 5-year Congress. They elected a whole new Politburo and Central Committee, all allies of President Xi, all who have sworn to support the very zero COVID policy that causes the protest in the first place. The Chinese people don't have many places to go, but they know right where the blame goes, and they are actually speaking it. One last thought on this. You know how those protests ended, right? We're all very clear on the tanks that rolled in. In the end, 2,700 people were dead. Twice as many were injured. That was a single protest in one square. The protest this last weekend involved 1,000 times more people across dozens of major regions. Let's hope my math sucks and pray that we don't have a repeat of 1989. This is game-changing. They either go full authoritarian and start slaughtering people like Mao, or there is a massive change in China.
Alrighty. So just some protests that are happening over, starting with COVID restrictions, moving on to the totalitarian nature of the CCP. But man, just how crazy is it that that's going on in today's world, that governments are locking people into their houses? And I know this is in China, but we have places like Australia and Canada that were to that point extreme in their COVID-19 lockdowns.
Yep.
And it just goes to show that the game's not over when it comes to the control of a government in our world, and that China right now, as he was talking about, our famous gentleman from the Blaze was describing how if this is similar to Tiananmen Square, and there's 1,000 times more people protesting and standing up, and just the world is changing and shifting, and it all seems to point back to 2 years ago when the first couple lockdowns were initiated, and how the government was exercising their right to control the populations that live in their cities and in their states, and government has had their chance to show the repercussions of not bowing down to them. And unfortunately for some of these people in China, it seems like it's going to be a very violent outcome for them standing up and protesting. But here in the West, we still have our ability to protest and speak truth and use our freedom of speech. And this is all going back to some of those things we started out the episode today with, which is we need to not sit idly by while our freedoms are taken from us, while everybody who speaks against the mainstream is blacklisted and banned and canceled, just like Kanye, to the point where now he can't even access his own money.
Yep.
We need to, as a community, now start to figure out how we can start to use the freedoms that we have here in the West to stand up for what's right.
Good versus evil.
Good versus evil, because it could be in the next few years that we're looking at a very similar situation to what they're dealing with in China. And I know I don't want to deal with that. I know I want to use the blessing of living in the West while we are also coming to battle with the freedom of speech being used to taint our minds and fill our TVs and our entertainment, with just trash. We also have to realize that we have the opportunity to still use it for good, and it's not all just bad. It's not all the depressing, push of this agenda or that agenda, but it's also time for the brave to stand up.
Yep.
For the people that truly want to stand for righteousness and stand against these agendas and stand against all of the
medical tyranny, the political just ideology that is leading people down a dark path on the leftist mindset that gets people all riled up to go and protest in the streets, yet they're protesting for something that is a degradation of our society.
that's going to lead us to the very thing that happened in Rome, where their whole society kind of degraded, their morality, their sexuality turned to just like crazy town. And then we saw the very quick fall of those empires. And I think that's what we're seeing here coming in the future, unless people stand up for what's right.
Yeah, and as the Joker said, because I brought up Joker earlier, he said, "Is it just me, or is it getting crazier out there?"
Yep.
It's not just you.
And
not just me.
You know,
it's real life.
I mean, the Joker just gave a kind of a point of release for the craziness that was swelling up in all the people, right?
Which came out before COVID.
Yeah.
Oh, we can't say that word.
We'll talk about that next week. I'm really looking forward to your breakdown. That's going to be really interesting.
And it's all about masculinity and stuff. Yeah, it's really good, I think.
All right, we got a couple news pictures that we want to cycle through for you guys. Some other current events and news. Here's the first one. Facing dire recruiting realities, the Navy raises the max enlistment age to 41.
Oh my God.
The Navy raised its maximum enlistment age to 41 Friday for sailors joining the fleet, a nod to the current recruiting struggles plaguing the entire U.S. military. Well, maybe it's because you are requiring people in the military to take a mRNA experimental you-know-what, and people are like, yeah, I'm going to stay out of that industry. Oh, man. And you know,
that means we both could be drafted.
Yeah. As we've talked about before, right? The military and the medical industry have been completely purged of anybody who's willing to stand up against those mandates. And now people that did stand up are being allowed to return to work. They're given a little bit of reprieve from the draconian mandates. However, a lot of people just left. And that means anybody that stayed in the medical industry, a lot of people that stayed in the military are completely given in to a lot of these agendas. They're saying, okay, you told me to do it, I'm going to do it. So now when people join, it's all the more kind of peer pressure to obey some of these crazy things that are coming down from the New World Order and all that kind of stuff. All right, next picture here. Nebraska agriculture officials say another 1.8 million chickens must be killed after bird flu was found on a farm in the latest sign that the outbreak had already prompted the slaughter of more than 50 million birds nationwide and continues to spread. Just another kind of red flag in terms of coming food shortage and the control of the food industry.
They want to add preservatives and all that, probably.
Yeah. All right, next picture here. We talked a little bit about the Artemis mission that's coming up, and I mentioned globes in a classroom, so I wanted to throw this picture in this week. This is how indoctrination works. The teacher isn't aware she too was taught a lie, as was the teacher who taught her. And the people blindly trust while the person who's teaching is ignorant to what they're passing on as a deception. And so I've heard it put this way, that our ancestors have passed on traditions and indoctrination in ignorance, and we have kept it in innocence. And that's why it's so important to wake up. And like I mentioned last time, you know, a globe in a classroom is a perfect example of how indoctrination works, because there's literally something tacked on the bottom of globes, not for educational purposes.
I was gonna try to look that up, but we don't have one globe where we're at right now.
We don't even have around. I've seen it myself, and it is almost on every single
I believe you.
globe where it says this is not for this is not a realistic representation of the earth, not for educational purposes, and yet it is in every single classroom. And they depict to us where they want us to believe we live, or what this realm really looks like. And if you do a little bit of research, you're going to find there's some major inconsistencies in that narrative. Let's show our next picture here. And this is how mass indoctrination works with the sheep of the world, right? I saw it on TV. And it's not just with the topic of the realm that we live in, but it is also with the medical industry, the media agendas, the sexual agenda, the whatever agenda. I saw it on TV, and when I see everybody else,
that must
watching
be true then, right?
It must be true. It must be good because everybody else is enjoying this
It
entertainment.
must be right.
Yeah,
that's what they think. What a lot of people.
Next one here. Something interesting is the science is baffled at this statistic that in Africa, only 6% are you know what, and COVID has practically disappeared, and yet scientists are baffled about why. So
I wonder.
Very interesting. There's so many interesting stories that came out last year, 2 years ago, about leaders in African nations being very suspicious of the agenda being pushed and not caving in to some of the World Health Organization's demands and mandates, and the testing protocols, and them testing things like fruit or goat hair or whatever, and it coming back positive, and they're just like, whoa, there's some hoodoo and hoodwinking going on with this topic. But next picture here. If you haven't yet, we mentioned this last week on our discussion. We shared the trailer. Check out this documentary, Died Suddenly. Pretty interesting, pretty compelling, very dark. But you want to be a watchman on the wall. You want to warn your family.
Apparently it's on Rumble.
It's on Rumble. You
Somebody
can watch it for free, I believe. Yeah. And as we enter into the colder months of the year, we need to get ready for the next push for participating in this mass human experiment with the technology, the mRNA technology that is being put into people's bodies, and how it is affecting health worldwide. And we're seeing just mass sudden adult death syndrome, and we just need to be prepared and be able to have tools like that documentary to warn people that we care and love about. And so that is all that I wanted to cover today for today's news segment. Hope you got something valuable out of that, everyone. And Jeremiah,
thank you.
Really enjoyed being able to do this live.
Every time I see something kind of Skiba News Nation-y, like on my phone, like I'll have the news playing or whatever, I'll turn it off because I know we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
So it's always good to get a little bit more knowledge and real knowledge from your expertise. I would call you an expert in finding the news. So thank you.
Well, we're both here to learn together, man. And as we sift through these stories, we can share our opinions. And there's a lot of things that we don't catch, of course. But it's all the more reason for our audience to, if you can, share with us what you're stumbling across, because I only have two eyes, and you only have two eyes. But hopefully, with the power of 1,000 minds out there, we can uncover some of the most important truth to share with the world.
Yeah, and forever stay on the quest for truth.
Yep.
That's what my dad always said. All right, well, I think it's time for an all-new Opas Corner. Take it away, Opa.
Mein Hut, der hat 3 Ecken. 3 Ecken hat mein Hut. Und hat nicht 3 Ecken, dann ist es nicht mein Hut.
Look, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. No, it's Opa's Corner. An American, a Scot, and a Canadian were in a terrible car accident. They were all brought to the same emergency room, but all 3 of them died before they arrived. Just as they were about to put the toe tag on the American, he stirred and opened his eyes. Astonished, the doctors and nurses present asked him what happened. Well, said the American, I remember the crash, and then there was a beautiful light, and then the Canadian and the Scot and I were standing at the gates of heaven. St. Peter approached us and said that we were all too young to die, and that for a donation of $50, we could return to the earth.
That's a grant.
So, of course, I pulled out my wallet and gave him the $50. And the next thing I knew, I was back here.
You related?
"That's amazing," said one of the doctors. "But what happened to the other two?" "Well, the last thing I saw," replied the American, "the Scot was haggling over the price, and the Canadian is waiting for the government to pay for his."
Oh, yeah.
3 guys die together in an accident and go to heaven. When they get there, St. Peter says, "We only have one rule here in heaven.
Kind of looks like our picture
Don't
from last week.
step on the ducks." So they enter heaven, and sure enough, there's ducks all over the place. It's almost impossible not to step on a duck. And although they tried their best to avoid them, the first guy accidentally steps on one. Along comes St. Peter with the ugliest woman he has ever seen. St. Peter chains them together and says, "Your punishment for stepping on a duck is to spend eternity chained to the ugly woman." The next day, the second guy steps accidentally on a duck, and along comes St. Peter, who doesn't miss a thing, and with him is another extremely ugly woman. He chains them together like the first guy. The third guy has observed all of this, and not wanting to be chained for all eternity to an ugly woman, is very, very careful where he steps. He manages to go months without stepping on any ducks, but one day St. Peter comes up to him with the most gorgeous woman he has ever laid his eyes on. A very tall, tan, curvaceous, sexy blonde. St. Peter chains them together without saying a word. The guy remarks, "I wonder what I did to deserve being chained to you for all of eternity." She says, "I don't know about you, but I stepped on a duck."
I heard that one when I was a kid.
A wealthy man died and went to heaven. He was met at the pearly gates by St. Peter, who welcomed him warmly and told him that he would be taken to his forever heavenly dwelling. He then led him down the streets of gold. They passed castle after fantastic castle, then huge mansion after huge mansion, then beautiful cottages, until they came to the end of the street, and St. Peter stopped the rich man in front of a little wooden shack that looks like it's about to fall down. "Welcome home," St. Peter said. "Why do I get this ugly thing when there are so many mansions I could live in?" the man demanded. "Well, we did the best we could with the money you sent us," St. Peter replied. A man visiting Texas goes to his hotel bar and hops up on a giant bar stool. "Boy, this seat is massive," he tells the bartender. The bartender tells him, "Everything is bigger in Texas." He orders a beer, and the bartender thrusts a half-a-gallon mug of ice-cold beer into his hands. "This is huge," he said. "Like I said, everything's bigger in Texas," the bartender says. He manages to drink the whole thing while chatting with the bartender, but eventually the half-a-gallon of liquid catches up with him. He asks the bartender where the bathroom is, and he says, "Down the hall, first door on the right." He starts down the hall, but misses the bathroom and walks through the second door, which happens to be the hotel pool. He walks forward and falls into the pool. And after falling and flailing and bobbing and to the surface, he desperately yells, "Don't flush! Don't flush!" And now for the funnies. I am delicious.
Dumber.
Taste funny. Oh, this guy is falling. I totally misunderstood what she was saying. Me too. Hold it right there, Charles. Not on our first date, you don't. Which one is yours? Let's be thankful for all the things we're about to knock off the table. I give thanks for the cat.
Yes.
It's a known fact that sheep that give us steel wool have no natural enemies. Think about it, Murray. If we could get this baby running, we could run over hikers, pick up females, chase down mule deer. Man, we'd be the grizzlies from hell. So, try to have her home by 12, okay?
12:02, 12:01. Wait.
What did I tell you two about jumping on the bed? Awesome! Primitive weed eaters. Hey, look! No hands! To mock a killing bird. Oh, sure. Grab a defenseless fish while he isn't looking. Big, tough guy. No doubt about it, Captain. It's definitely an Italian sub. Hold it! His Majesty just got the joke.
That's me sometimes.
Well, they were obviously married.
I know that.
What is it? I have no idea. Southwestern Belle. Well, if I'm lucky, I should be able to get off this thing in about 6 more weeks. Where is Catwoman? Isn't she coming with us? She got sidetracked.
He's in a box.
Oh, God. He's wearing Crocs. A big day for Jimmy. Snake World, order now. The bluebird of happiness, long absent from his life, Ned is visited by the chicken of depression. It dries the washing using the very latest technology, a combination of solar and wind power. The signs of the time.
Yeah.
And that concludes another Opa's Corner.
Mein Hut, der hat 3 Ecken. 3 Ecken hat mein Hut. Und hat nicht 3 Ecken, dann ist es nicht mein Hut.
Opa's Corner is now available on my own YouTube channel. Like, share, and subscribe.
That was great, Opa. Everybody, show Opa some love and follow his, subscribe to his YouTube channel because Opa's Corner is probably one of my favorite segments on the show. Thank you, Opa. So now it's time for some history.
Do it.
So today we're going to be talking about a man named Frank Olson and how he was killed by MKULTRA. He also worked for MKULTRA. Frank Olson was an American biological warfare scientist and an employee of the United States Army Biological Warfare Laboratories, who ended up knowing too much, and it led to his own death, his murder. I don't know. You be the judge. Let's play clip number 1.
Tonight we report on a secret CIA research project carried out in Montreal in which mental patients felt they were used as the CIA's guinea pigs.
They kept you asleep for 23 days, and while I was asleep they were shocking the heck out of me with electric shocks.
Ladies and gentlemen, MKUltra is a rabbit hole that doesn't seem to end. This is the tragic yet mysterious case of Frank Rudolph Olson. Project Chatter, Project Artichoke, Project Midnight Climax, MK Naomi, MK Delta, MKUltra. All codenames used by the United States CIA to act out on illegal experimentations of drugging humans with psychedelics. The purpose? From the released declassified documentations, it's believed to be for the purpose of mind control. One of the grandfathers of MKUltra was American biochemical weapons expert Frank Olson. Frank Olson was thoroughly experienced in biological warfare. While serving in World War II as captain for the U.S. Army Chemical Corps, Olson would receive a life-changing call from one Ira Baldwin. Ira, at the time, was Olson's university thesis advisor and was also mentoring Sidney Gottlieb. Ira had been asked to lead a new program focused around creating biological weapons, and thus requested Olson to join him as one of the very first scientists in Maryland's Fort Detrick. During his time, Olson would assist in studying modern technological warfare and even partake in the utilization of anthrax, a poison that is deadly to both livestock and humans. Eventually, he would be discharged from the Army and would continue to work in Fort Detrick, expanding his research into aerobiology. He would assist in several operations, such as Sea Spray, Harness, and eventually, MKUltra. Spring of 1949. The United States' fear of the Soviets grew to absurd levels when they assumed the Russians had mastered micro-weaponization, a dangerously covert style of chemical warfare. This phobia resulted in creating the Special Operations Division at Fort Detrick, sometimes referred to as being Dietrich within a Dietrich because of its own secrecy. These new operations led Olson to be the acting chief within a year of being created. But after 4 years of being the chief of the Special Operations Division, Olson stepped down, supposedly due to pressures and stresses of the job affecting his ulcers. But during this time at Fort Detrick, Olson secretly began working as a CIA employee. Once stepping down, Frank Olson would stay in contact with the Special Operations Division, but would officially join the CIA. According to Olson's son, Eric Olson, his new work with the CIA would create a lasting effect on his psyche. He would come into work in the morning and see piles of dead monkeys. Eric said, "That messes with you. He wasn't the right guy for that." During his time with the CIA, he'd experienced numerous illegal interrogations, consisting of torturing victims for knowledge in international CIA black sites. Said victims were quote-unquote literally interrogated to death with experimental methods, combining drugs, hypnosis, and torture, all to attempt to master brainwashing techniques and erase memories. After Operation Big Switch was finalized, Olson had arrived in Europe, where it was rumored he traveled to London, Paris, Stockholm, and Berlin. Upon Olson's return to the States, his mood and attitude had drastically changed, according to his family. And according to Norman Cornoyer, a close co-worker to Olson, he stated that Olson had witnessed more interrogations in Europe, and thus became convinced that the United States had used biological weapons during the Korean War, a strong offender to the recently signed Geneva Convention. After this, Olson visited psychiatrists trained to deal with high-level security clearances. It is speculated that the therapist, William Sargent, reported that Olson had become a security threat, thus requesting his access to military facilities be limited. But it's too late. Olson knew too much.
Olson knew too much. So Frank Olson worked at Camp Detrick, Maryland, and at a meeting, he was covertly dosed with LSD by his colleague, the head of the CIA's MKULTRA, Sidney Gottlieb. Is that not pretty intense?
Sounds like this guy had a brain that was at use at one point, but at some point that changed and it became a liability. And they had to destroy that mind before it leaked some of those secrets.
That's right on point with my beliefs, but it's crazy how they ruled his death and how he died, because he was staying, when he was dosed, it was 9 days. He died 9 days later after being fed LSD, and he didn't know it. I think it was in water. So he plunged to his death from a window of the Hotel Statler in New York. Opa, do you know where that is?
Yep.
Where is that? Kind of in New York.
It's Midtown.
Okay. And the U.S. government described his death as suicide. Of course they did. Then they ruled it as misadventure. So let's play the second clip, kind of shows you a little bit more about what I'm talking about.
But it's too late. Olson knew too much.
Olson knew too much.
He had spent a decade with Fort Detrick, acted chief of the Special Operations Division, knowing information that others even at Detrick weren't classified to, and had witnessed interrogative accidental murders in Europe. Olson acted within multiple illegal operations, such as MKULTRA and Project Artichoke, and helped Gottlieb bring LSD to the United States. And if American forces had used biological weapons, this would break the Geneva Convention's law against chemical warfare, which could result in the United States of America facing global outrage and possibly sanction them away from trading with the outside world, severely hurting the economy. While there is hefty evidence leaning towards the US using biological weapons, there is no concrete proof. Only Olson would be the one to know the truth.
You're right.
The very thought that Olson might know too much resulted in him being a security risk. During this time, MKULTRA was in full operative effect for several months. And from November 18th to November 20th, 1953, a dozen co-workers went on a retreat to Deep Creek Lake, Maryland. Numerous agents, including Olson, were then covertly tested upon with a manufactured truth serum, aka an LSD cocktail. The next morning, he returns home having no appetite nor any emotional connections to his family. Frank Olson was a new disturbed man. "I've made a terrible mistake," Olson's wife remembered him blurting out. By this time, barely a handful of agents knew the very core purpose and intentions of MKULTRA. November 23rd, Olson and his boss, Vincent Ruitt, arrived at Dietrich, both still recovering from the questionable experimentations performed on them. But Olson had enough. His mentality could only handle so much. Vincent recalled Olson having explosive fits, demanding that he be fired or he'll quit that very day, and that he was often disoriented and felt quote-unquote all mixed up and incompetent about his work field. Although he was capable of being calmed down, it was agreed that Olson should undergo psychiatric help. So, on November 24th, Olson, Vincent, and co-worker Robert Lashbrook flew to New York City for a few days to meet up with Dr. Harold Abramson, an American physician who advocated the idea of therapeutic LSD. And not even 4 days later, on November 28, 1953, Frank Rudolph Olson would fall 10 floors onto the sidewalk in front of Hotel Statler. The manager of the hotel rushes over to his body, still somewhat alive and attempting to speak. But unfortunately, Olson passed away before medical help could arrive. The police quickly entered room 1018A, in which Olson had been staying in. However, there were two names registered to the room: Frank Olson and Robert Lashbrook. As they inspected the room, they pushed open the bathroom door to find Lashbrook, head in his hands. He had told them he was simply sleeping, and that he had quote-unquote heard a noise and woke up. As the police investigated the scene, one officer took note of the similarities between Frank Olson's death and the 1948 case of Lawrence Duggan, another high-level government agent that had plummeted to his death from his New York office after being thought to be a security threat. Yet, the police report states that Frank Olson had purposely thrown himself out of the window and died shortly after impact. The hotel's phone operator reported connecting a phone call from room 1018A to an outside number that belonged to Dr. Harold Abramson. All that was said in the brief conversation was, "Well, he's gone. That's too bad." "In all my years in the hotel business," the night manager recalled, "I never encountered a case where someone got up in the middle of the night, ran across a dark room in his underwear, avoiding two beds, and dove through a closed window with the shade and curtains drawn." The Olson family had told friends that Frank had simply suffered a mental breakdown from stress, resulting in him taking his life. However, the family actually had no real knowledge of the details around his death. That would be until the limited documentation of MKULTRA was released to the public in 1975. Now, answers were demanded. That year, the government confirmed that Olson had been illegally tested on with LSD just 9 days prior to his death. The Olson family planned to sue the agency for Frank's wrongful death, but the case was settled out of court, with the family accepting a payment of $750,000. In today's age, that settlement would round up to $3.9 million. In 1994, the Olson family had decided to have Frank's body operated on for a second autopsy, seeing that the first one, which was medically performed almost immediately after his death, only stated Frank had simple cuts and abrasions from his fall. But the second autopsy discovered something much darker: a large hematoma on the left side of Frank's head, and a large injury to his chest. The team that performed the autopsy agreed that the injuries were caused from blunt force trauma. Blunt force trauma that happened before his fall.
Kind of like Bob Saget?
James Stars,
Wow.
the lead operator of the autopsy, claimed this new discovery to be, quote-unquote, rankly and starkly suggestive of homicide. Fun fact: in the CIA's Manual of Assassination, it states that the most efficient accident in simple assassination is a fall of 75 feet or more onto a hard surface. 75 feet is only 5 stories tall, half the height that Frank Olson had plummeted. Even with this brand new bombshell of information, the Olson family was only met with rejections to further the case, due to already accepting the 1976 settlement. Even though the case was dismissed, U.S. District Judge James Boasberg had written the following about the case. While the court must limit its analysis to the 4 corners of the complaint, the skeptical reader may wish to know that the public reader supports many of the allegations in the family suit, far-fetched as they may sound.
So the U.S. government first called his death a suicide. Then they ruled it misadventure. And most people, including myself and his family, believe that it was murder. I mean, it kind of reminds me of Bob Saget, because when they did Bob Saget's autopsy, they found that it was more like a ruling of blunt force trauma. So there's a lot of inconsistencies, in my opinion, and it just shows knowing too much can kill you. Always be aware of your surroundings, and don't believe the official narrative given by the media. Those are my thoughts. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, they start with calling you crazy, making you feel like you're crazy, and then that's how they discredit you.
Mhm.
And it got to the point where this guy, who probably was just aware of some very traumatizing and dark secrets, it led to his death, homicide, suicide, whichever. And it's all because they wanted to make somebody who had a truth, they wanted to discredit them in any way possible. And man, what a sad story. And
could you imagine being drugged like that? Like not even
knowing too.
That would make me feel like I went crazy.
Yep.
It's just, it's crazy. I remember the first time I ever heard about this case was I was watching a documentary on Netflix, and it's called Wormwood, and that's going to be the third clip. But when I was watching it, it was around filming of maybe episode 2 or 3, and I was like, this would be perfect for Skiba News Nation, but we had just covered MKULTRA, and so I was like, I'll wait a little bit longer. So I had this one, jotted down, and it was like too much at the time to where I had to break it down because there's so many things, so many conspiracies around it, and so much they were trying to cover up. It blew my mind. But anyway, it's called Wormwood. It's on Netflix, and let's play that trailer.
Now this is about the same gentleman, right?
Yes.
We've just covered.
Yep.
What were you told at the time of your father's death?
And his family.
I was told that your
being
father
interviewed
has had an accident. But
They
that
do a
was the
really good
cover
job of
story.
retweeting.
By the CIA. My father, Frank Olson, was an army scientist.
Through a window, a
His
closed
research group
window.
had a relationship with the CIA.
Oh my goodness.
They take him to New York Tuesday morning.
And that's his
early
son
Saturday
right
morning,
there.
He's dead. What was my
Almost
father
looks like he
doing?
was
What
thrown
was
out.
the CIA doing?
No, you don't say?
What
It was definitely thrown out.
CIA documents deal with a
I
project
mean,
codenamed MKULTRA. There was in it
I don't even know how that's
CIA
possible.
experiment on an unwitting civilian who was
Right?
given LSD.
Maybe we're crazy.
You're the one on stage tonight, Dr. Olson. You're all a bunch of jokers.
This has been the shift from thinking that my father's death was a mysterious suicide to knowing that it was a CIA atrocity.
This is 1975.
They do a good
There were
job
a lot of
showing
questions about the integrity
what
of
he
US
could have been
government.
feeling.
The government was so eager
Out of
to shut
mind,
down
out of body.
Crazy.
The tragedy that happened to the family was very deep and very real.
Eric's consistent whole life thing with the CIA.
Sucked into this terrible hole. The CIA was using LSD on people, but I think the real bad was something worse.
Once they're done with you, they just wipe their hands clean,
He's a man
push you
that
out a
was
window.
profoundly distressed about what he was learning.
Or you accidentally
Frank
kill
Olson, a former
yourself.
CIA scientist, may have been murdered.
If you thought somebody was detrimental, you would have no problem dealing with him.
But then the question is, who ordered that?
Maybe the same people that
The United States began to do
had
things
Jeffrey Epstein
which put
accidentally
its
kill
own
himself.
democratic
I mean,
institutions in
maybe
great
their
jeopardy.
children. all following in the
And my
footsteps
father
of
was
this
in the center of that.
ongoing agenda to hide the truth.
Frank was somebody who has secrets, and he was dangerous. I can't tell you more.
Worth checking out for sure. Looks like they really depicted the story
Very well.
very well.
Yeah, it was like a documentary mixed with and the casting was great. And then they're like dramatizations, but this is just a personal thing that I have. But like, I don't like watching like biopics or dramatizations if they don't fit the actual time period. Like, because of my autism, my slight autism, it just drives me crazy. So when I saw this movie, it was like perfect. Like, everything about it is, it just dot a lot of I's, crossed a lot of T's. It was pretty intense. So I suggest everybody checking that out if you have a Netflix account.
You know, what it made me think of is if 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, they're doing these cover-ups and they're experimenting on man, on their own employees. And just imagine how that agenda transformed and mutated into what we are dealing with today in the shadows.
I personally don't think MKUltra is done. I think they're still they are still experimenting on humans in hospitals.
They learned what they had to learn, and they just called it a new, a MK next generation,
Mm-hmm.
Which leads me to ask the question, do you know what the MK in these, what is that? We got to look that up real
Let me
quick.
look
What
it up
does
real
MK
quick.
stand for? Because they all start with MK Ultra, MK this or that. Anyways, we'll look into that.
If you know, leave it in the comments and tell us what it means, because we have no idea. We've been looking. So, anyways, that's all I got for history. I hope you enjoyed that little piece of history that not many people know about. So, that's all I got. Time for some memes. Meme me up. Meme me up.
All right, we got a couple funny ones for you guys here. Let's start off with the first one. I'm old enough to remember the very first TED Talk. It was most excellent.
Most excellent.
Most excellent. All right.
You know, Ghislaine Maxwell
Yeah.
did a TED Talk.
Oh, really?
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
I'm
talking about, I don't know exactly what she's talking
intrigued.
about, but we need to cover
How
that.
to manipulate the elite? Is it something titled that way?
I want to say it was something with global warming, but I don't know, which is,
Here's our next little picture here. The land of milk and honey to the left, and the land of powdered cream and artificial sweetener to the right. Choices. All right. First, they sell the problem, then they sell the cure. And how true
That's
is
the
that?
truth, yep.
Wow. Churches and Christian movements throughout history. Starting in AD, you have the apostolic, people walkers of the way, and then you have the Catholic Church following in the 300s. And so this is where our denomination came along. Finally got the Bible right, way here at the end of this big tree. And this is taking place in membership class. So everybody knows that their particular denomination's truths are the epitome of all true and good things, and everybody else has it wrong. And
Yep.
Unfortunately, that's one of the things that I learned from Rob is just we got to fight against the traditions of our elders that we've inherited in ignorance, kept in innocence. And there's a reason there's 40,000 denominations out there, but there's only one scripture that we should be, going back to find out really what the truth is, in terms of our faith walk. All right, next. When you think the internet argument is over, but he comes back, push your glasses up and get ready to type.
I'm sorry. He's like one of the creepiest, ugliest looking guys I've ever seen.
Yeah, that guy is, yeah.
He's a creep.
All right. Black Friday. Because only in America people trample others for sales exactly one day after being thankful for what they already have. Of course, coming through the Thanksgiving season, holiday season, very timely, of all the people rushing to get their Black Friday savings.
The one good thing about Amazon is you don't have to be trampled.
Oh, true. You just get it in the mail.
And I'm very anti-Amazon because I used to work there. But
All right.
Cyber Monday, I think they call it now.
Here's a cat divvying up the how to share the sleeping arrangements. Here's my side, and here's your side.
That is so
Stealing
true.
from OPA'S corner.
Oh, Opa said he had this Garfield clipping already. Sorry, Opa. I guess we have
You
a
just beat him
similar,
to it.
similar sense of humor or something.
Yeah, you beat him to it. That's great.
Alrighty. Did you know that all of the scenes from Star Wars were actually filmed on Earth? And that all the scenes from NASA were filmed in the exact same place? What do you know?
Well, you know that the town that they built is actually still there. People visit it as a filming location. It's like used by
Oh, wow.
it was, I can't remember exactly where it is. It's not in Hollywood, but wherever it is, they still use this stuff. Cool.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I know even on the NASA side of things, there's like the topography in the background of some of the moonshots are the exact same as some places in some deserts that you can almost line it up, and it's like, oh wow, it's the same exact place. What do you know?
Isn't that convenient?
Weird, a little weird,
And this is me. I'm not a me.
All right. Oh, here's a cool picture of ancient Israelite cosmology I wanted to show you guys, and it just depicts the ancient view of the realm we live in. All right, next picture. I hope this doesn't turn into a tradition. It's the Indians versus the Pilgrims or whatever.
Another OPA corner.
I beat to it. I'm sorry, Opa. All right. These are more comic book clippings and newspaper clippings, so I gotta make sure
draw
to
the
get
line
back
somewhere.
onto the meme realm. I think Sierra shared some of these, so shout out to her, my wife. All right, next picture. And then the turkey just killed itself. So this is, of course, Bill Clinton feeding his family a turkey that just killed itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that's right after he flew for the 22nd time to on Jeffrey Epstein's plane.
Yep.
Probably.
I did not have sexual relations with this turkey.
Did you see the one that I posted for Thanksgiving?
What?
It was Joe Biden sniffing a turkey.
Oh, really?
And I put happy sniffing turkey day or something.
Sniffing turkey. Yeah, I did
'Cause
see
he was
that.
like-
Yeah.
It was funny.
All right, next clip here. The baby pictures of Adam and Eve. Dirt and rib. How cute. All right.
Yep.
Just a reminder to everyone, collect this: books, knowledge, wisdom, scriptures, ancient texts, not this. And
What are those baseball cards?
no, I think they're the pop bobbleheads.
Oh my gosh. I do not like those. They're not even cool.
I mean, yeah, I can get that people think like it was almost like they created a new collectible thing, and it's almost too forced
Yeah.
in terms of memorabilia. I know you're really
And it's
into
made here in
memorabilia,
America too, I think.
but yeah, I mean,
And it looks like a Japanese toy kind of.
yeah, it
took that
definitely
style.
kind of like a Japanese style, the big head.
It's a bobblehead. It's a glorified bobblehead that doesn't bobble. Right?
Yep. Yeah. But I mean, it reminds me of back in the day where people had like studies and they had all of their, things like collected. And now, it's just, it's a different age we live in.
Well, if you wanna continue the thing, we have the books and the workbooks and
Oh yeah, for sure.
so grow
you
your
know.
collection.
I think this was our final picture here, right, Opa? Yeah, this is what everybody's going through with all the sports in the past few weekends. Everybody's watching football and soccer, or also known as football, in other places. Everybody's going nuts, and the final score 0-1.
I never understood soccer. That's why I love this Norm hat.
Oh yeah,
it just says sports.
Sports. Yeah, I support sports.
Sports. Let's go sports.
Modern gladiator rings, right?
Yep.
All right. Well, that's all the memes for today, and once again, had a blast getting to hang out in the studio with you guys, and we'll be back in our old location next week. But it's been really great just being able to, conversate back and forth in person. It's so much more easy to kind of have a conversation without doing it over the internet. And we talked about this at the beginning of the show, but also just another reminder, if you want to help support Sheila, Jeremiah, Skiba News Nation, and continuing on kind of Kingsgate Media and all that entails, make sure to go over and check out their store. Check out the.
You're going to be doing virtual house church.
Yep.
With some of those.
Yep.
Too.
So we'll be doing
cool.
some studies through these, taking notes, and as well as we got some great resources that Rob, your dad, put together, and you guys can see that. We'll share on screen the website and some of the great packages. You guys can save a lot if you get some bundles. So.
And also, if you want to support this channel specifically, we have our own merch, which Jake is repping right now.
Yeah, I got a cool T-shirt here, or a
I got
hoodie.
this. Liberalism is a disease. I don't know if y'all can see. There we go. And some Skiba News Nation hats, and I got some cool, what would you call them? Like, where I honor my dad. They're like cool photos of him. 2 different designs, but.
And an Opas corner.
And an Opas corner.
And
He's got his own merch.
Oh yeah.
So, thank you for watching episode 25. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next week. If you would like to submit a story, topic, or have any other inquiries, please email submit@skibanewsnation.com. Also, you can email Jeremiah Skiba personally at jeremiah@skibanewsnation.com. Also, email Jake personally at jake@skibanewsnation.com. If you want to write us a letter, send us something, help support us, or just say hi, please send your letter to Jeremiah Skiba, P.O. Box 560-271, The Colony, Texas 75056. If you write us a letter, I'll do my best to write you back. Hey Skiba News Nation family, thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. You can also help support this channel by getting yourself some Skiba News Nation merch. Also, we are proud to announce that we are now on Patreon, where you will get bonus content, shoutouts, and much more. Thank you again for watching and helping us stay on the quest for truth. Huge shout out to all our Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for your support. We couldn't do this show without you. If you want to help support us, go to patreon.com/Skiba News Nation. We are also proud to announce that Skiba News Nation podcast is now available on podcast platforms.